Now imagine this. Imagine a world where the team captains who were looking over the group of kids for the choice of your team playing kickball chose the worst candidates first. The ones who had no chance of bringing victory to your team. And as they chose their team, not only did they choose the worst candidates, which means Neil and Laura got picked first, they picked their teams so that each successive choice was the next worst candidate. The stars, the ones who always won the races, were the last to be chosen. Imagine that. Sounds like heaven. To me. When you take an analytical look at Luke's gospel, that is exactly his take on God's character and on Jesus' ministry. Luke's gospel is known as the Great Reversal. Have you ever heard that phrase before? Luke's gospel is known as the Great Reversal. And what that means is the least likely are the first chosen. All the way through Luke, nearly every story in Luke's writing, the main character, the lead, is the least likely to be chosen. Jesus loves and chooses the underdogs and the outsiders, those with the most challenged, those who are least perfect, at least in our eyes. So, we're going to talk about underdogs today. And I'm going to tell you a few underdogs, and then you're going to tell me what story they're from. Tom Cratchit and Tiny Tim. Scrooge. Yeah, Scrooge. How about Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, and Ron Weasley? The Harry Potter series, right? How about David and Goliath? That's right. Can you think of any other underdogs? Well, did any of you ever watch the cartoon Underdog? Underdog. Coming to the rescue. Underdog. Luke loves the underdogs. Luke loves the least likely because in Luke's gospel, the underdogs prosper. Luke loves the tax collectors. He loves the Samaritans. He loves the young people. He loves people who are known for their sinful ways. Luke loves the leper, the servants, the criminals, and even the clueless disciples. So what do we know about Luke? This is a pop quiz. You tell me what we know about Luke. He was a doctor. He was the Jesus era version of a doctor. What else do we know about Luke? Well, then it's good that we have this review before we start Luke. What do you think? He traveled a lot with Paul. As a matter of fact, when Paul was in prison toward the end of his life, who was with him? Luke. Luke, the physician, stayed with Paul. And the books of Philemon and 2 Timothy share that. So that is not a guess, that's a fact. Do we know when the book of Luke was written? I'm not going to let you cheat. Huh? Well, actually, John was the last gospel written, but Luke was one of the later gospels written. Scholars figure that Luke was written probably between 75 and 90 AD. So Luke was a rather prolific writer. Luke is the first of 2 volumes that Luke wrote. Do you know what the other one is? Acts of the Apostles. Luke wrote Luke, then Luke wrote Acts of the Apostles. Why did he write it? Who did he write to? Theophilus. That's right. Cindy read that for us today. How'd you like to name your kid Theophilus? I think he'd be Theo pretty quickly. What do you think? Yeah. This is a brownie point question. Do you know what the name Theophilus means? It means lover of God. Isn't that interesting? And so Theophilus probably was a wealthy patron, and he may well have commissioned Luke to investigate the events of Jesus' life and write about them, and he may have commissioned Luke to stay with Paul. So there's like a partnership there. So why does Luke say that he wrote these works? This is a cheat hint. Cindy read it for us. Yeah, an ordered account of the truth. So there were a lot of stories circulating around about Jesus back in those early decades, and Luke probably knew how to research something. Luke was a man of education as a physician, and so he did research to do an orderly account. What does it mean to do research? Bob Bowman, if you are writing a research paper, what do you need to do?
First you have to collect and analyze the data.
Analyze the data.
Then you got to cross-check who's done work before to see that whether there's error or disagree. Then you have to analyze again to find out what you get.
Cross-check. Yep. Compare. Cross-check. What's another thing that you want to do if you can?
Check again somehow to validate it.
All right. Validation. So validation, if you can do this and you're writing an ordered paper, you want to talk to eyewitnesses. Or in Bob's world, you want to talk to the original theory originator. All right? So Luke probably was comparing everything that had been gathered about Jesus, but he's also talking to eyewitnesses. So, as such, Luke is not just a biography, but a gospel. Another brownie point question, what does the word gospel mean? Good news. That's right. He's writing with a purpose. It's not just to share details of Jesus' life, but he's writing to confirm and deepen the faith of those who will be reading this. He's writing so that those who already believe can have this ordered account. You read this, and you're going to know the progression of Jesus' miraculous birth, to Jesus' teaching, to Jesus' death and resurrection. Jesus comes back on the road to Emmaus to explain to those traveling disciples what all of it means. And then he's going to write Acts to talk about how the church then came into being and spread. Luke, Judy, I don't have a very organized mind. I think in rainbows. Bob thinks in scientific fact. Mr. Analytical. I'm Ms. Rainbow. I love the flowery stuff. Luke is writing a little more analytical, but with a purpose, to expand faith. He's painting a compelling picture of Jesus, not just for those who believe, but for those who would come to believe. Now, have you ever done a comparison of the Gospels in your reading? So, there's a lot of similarities. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are called the synoptic Gospels. What does synoptic mean? Same. S-Y-N on the front means same. Optic, synoptic. What's optic? What you see. All right? So Matthew, Mark, and Luke are called the synoptic Gospels. They have a lot of the same vision and stories. John is a little different. If you read the Gospel of John, he uses a lot of different things in his writing to talk about Jesus. Why do you think Luke included the stories that he did? He picks up some of the same stories. As a matter of fact, the feeding of the 5,000, you remember that miracle? That's in all four Gospels. But there's a lot of stuff that's in Luke that is not found anywhere else. Why did he choose those stories? Luke, the physician, was trying to reach an audience with a particular handicap. Luke, the physician, was trying to reach an audience with a particular handicap. And the handicap that he was trying to reach was not so much physical, but the mental handicap of, I can never be worthy of God's love. I am a second-class citizen. I am an outsider. I'm an underdog. I'm an outcast. I'm an outlaw. And God can never love someone like me. And Luke is saying, not true. Luke is talking to those who are marginalized and broken and poor, those who have felt unseen and alone and unheard. Luke is talking to the second-class citizens. And he's telling them, God chooses you. God chooses you. Have you ever felt like an underdog? Not smart enough, not rich enough, not handsome enough, not gifted enough, not worthy enough for God to love you, for God to forgive you, for God to invite you into heaven? Luke is going to challenge your feelings of inadequacy. And he's going to tell you there is nothing that is going to exclude you from heaven except your refusal to accept God's gift. So, this is my challenge. Would you be willing to covenant with me for a summer exercise? Let's read the Gospel of Luke together. 3 chapters a week will take us through Luke by the end of this sermon series. And with each reading, I'd like us to ask some questions. Now, you can see them up here, but they're also printed in your bulletin, and they're also in this week's announcements. But we're going to ask ourselves, what characters do we see in this story? Do we know any more about this particular character from reading elsewhere in the Bible than this story reveals? If you have a Bible that has commentaries and footnotes, those are very handy with that question. We're going to ask ourselves, do we see any heroes and villains in this story? Luke's got a lot of heroes and villains. What is unexpected about the story that we're reading? What's the point of the story? And how is this story relevant to life today? So, the stories that we're going to be looking at from the book of Luke are listed in your bulletin in the order that we're going to look at them. And a study of Luke can be life-changing. So you can read Luke in any order that you'd like, but if you'd like to read the story that we are considering, you might want to pick the chapter that we're looking at that particular week. You know, we have a lot of goals for summer. Some of them might be weeding the garden, some of them might be cleaning the garage, some of them might be a particular vacation. But it's a good spiritual goal to say, read the Gospel of Luke? Sure. Let's see what Luke has to say. So today Cindy is going to help me serve communion.